Oh, this one's a man and a woman.
Alright, go ahead.
This one's... Okay. The Adventure of the Dirty Danley. After a long drive, Dan finally reaches the faraway land of Florida. Damn, that was a long drive. I'm just glad I got here. Hope the address McNally gave me were correct, Dan says to himself. As he starts to think about checking into a room at the motel, he quickly decides to grab a bite to eat before then. Dan gets out of his car and takes a long look around. Damn, this place is not that bad. Annie sure lives in a nice state, a lot better than home. He walks to the diner and enters. It was nearly empty with only 2 souls inside. He proceeds to take a seat at the main counter, while the older woman that was working there walked towards him. Wow, says the woman, what is a young man like yourself coming in at this time of night? Just looking to get something to eat, ma'am, replies Dan. Well, welcome. What will you have? Dan orders a breakfast meal, unaware of the individual walking behind him. Hey there, pal, quietly the man said. Dan turns to his left to notice a man sit down next to him. Mind telling me why you look like you've seen a ghost? Says the man. Yeah, that, huh? I drove all the way down from New York to see this girl that I've liked for quite a long time. However, I don't know if I have the balls to go see her face to face, Dan replies. Well, you know what they say, there are always ways to ease the pressure, says the man. Dan wasn't sure what he meant by that, but he was fairly interested with what the man was preaching. What do you mean, Dan questions. Alcohol is what you need. It will solve all your problems. What's your choice of poison, kid? The old man asked. In the back of Dan's mind, he knew he could not face her sober. Alright, I'm in. How about a few beers? I don't need much in my system, says Dan. See, now that's the spirit, the man replies. At that moment, the waitress comes back with Dan's meal. The man notices her approaching. Hey, I will wait for you outside, the man says abruptly. He quickly rushes out the door. The woman sets the plate down in front of Dan. Hey, a word of advice. Don't trust anyone around here, son, especially that man. He's been giving me bad vibes the moment he walked in. Dan turns around towards the door only to notice the woman disappears when he turns back. What the fuck, Dan says to himself. At that moment, Dan gets a phone call. Huh, didn't think I would be getting a call from him around this time, Dan says to himself. He answers the phone with a simple response. Hello, says Dan. How was the drive? Bob replies. It was good, long as fuck though. I just pulled into town, it's too late to go there today, so I'll go in the morning. Okay, man, I was just calling to check if everything was okay, Bob says. Yeah, it's good. Thanks for calling, man, Dan replies. No problem, man. Let me know how it goes later. They both hang up. After the short conversation, Dan finishes his meal and looks into his wallet. My wallet is looking a little thin. Good thing I have my card on me. Dan gets up, leaves some money on the counter, and heads for the door. Stopping in the doorway, he glances back in the table and exits the diner. Hey, over here, calls a familiar voice. Dan turns around for the sound of the call and sees a large man in front of a black truck. Dan quickly walks over to him. You ready, dude? Says the man. Yeah, so are you gonna buy the alk? If you have noticed, I'm not 21. Don't worry, friend, I got it covered. Think of it as a gift from me. Dan and the man make their way to the local liquor store. Once they arrive, the man turns out. Before walking off, he turns. Stay here. Dan follows what he was ordered. A couple of minutes have passed and the man comes out. We're in luck, little man. They have the good shit. The man says. Sweet, so what now? The man hands Dan a beer. Well, I don't think it's best to check into the motel with alcohol, but there's a park nearby. We don't have to worry about someone seeing us drink in public. I mean, I wasn't planning on drinking tonight. I want to get up early enough to go see her, Dan says. Come on, man, it's barely even 1 a.m. Just have a drink with me. I want to get acquainted with you. Dan thinks to himself for a brief moment. Alright, why not? Let's go, Dan replies. After a short drive, they reach their destination. Here we are, little man, says the man. They both exit the car and walk to benches in the park. The man picks up a beer from the bag. Dan looks down at the beer in his hand. Before taking a drink, he stops and eases the situation with a cautious question. So, what's your name? Dan asks. No offense, kid, but names take too long. You can just call me friend. Dan had an unsure feeling about his new acquaintance. Okay, Dan says with a cautious voice. After a couple drinks in, Dan had started to feel the effects of the alcohol slowly creep into his system. Man, the stuff is getting to me, Dan says in a drunken manner. Yeah, the devil's nectar is always the best, says the man. After 20 or more minutes, neither of them had said a word. The long, cold silence was starting to sink into the air like a cold chill. Dan had a strange feeling, like an uncertainty that he could not explain at that moment. Dan had remembered the woman from the diner, and without thinking twice, Dan asked the man a question. So how do you know that woman? Says Dan. What woman? The man retorted. You know, the woman from the diner. Oh, you mean Ashley, he replies. At that moment, Dan remembers the name tag that the woman had worn. Prudence was her name, and this man was lying. For a brief moment, Dan had finally understood the situation that he had placed himself in. He wanted to remove himself from the catastrophic events that were about to take place. Hey, I'll be right back. I'm gonna go take a piss, Dan says in an anxious manner. Really? We just got started, says the man. Sorry, I just really have to go. Dan makes his way into the bathroom. It was poorly lit and damaged. Fuck me, I fucked up bad. What the hell was I thinking? That wasn't worth the fucking alcohol. As Dan sat on the bathroom floor, he felt the pressure of the decisions he had made sink in. He ponders on how he may be able to pull himself from the array of dreading disparity that is being forced upon him. A large eruption of fear and anxiety showers over him, and a tear streams down his face and hits the ground. The sounds arose through the room. He felt like he was lost in a sea of disparity, but in the darkness there was a light. Like an angel or a goddess who lowered her hand, and with an open palm, Dan reaches out, and just like that, she is gone. Dan remembers that he can't give up. He must move forward, and with a newly found sense of courage, he gets up on his feet and proceeds to exit the bathroom. As soon as he attempts to step out, he is met by the same large figure that he has once seen before. Hello, friend, says the familiar voice. Wham! And with a sharp sting, Dan was on the ground, wheezing with an indescribable amount of pain. Regardless of the pain, Dan turns his head to see the familiar figure. You shouldn't have poked your nose into things that don't involve you, friend, says the man. I don't want to resort to this act of violence, but you leave me with no choice. The man slowly turned Dan over and with his left hand reached deep into his pocket to retrieve his wallet. Sorry, my friend, but I need this more than you right now. With that, the man slowly turns. With one last glimpse and a disturbing smile, the man disappeared in the dark and decrepit night. Dan had fell unconscious, and after a short period, he had woken up to a loud crackle in the sky. He quickly jolted up and turned his side upwards. A single drop of rain landed upon his face. The first drop, Dan says to himself in a weakened tone, felt like the clashing of the sea or the burning of Hades' flame. The cracks of lightning slicing through the darkened sky like the gods themselves were outraged. It felt like that, then at the moment Dan thought it was all over. He lowered his head in an act of defeat and seen a small scrap of paper covered in mud and rain. Dan slowly lowered his hand into the mud and retrieved the damaged scrap paper, and slowly wiping away some of the mud, he reads the now familiar inscription. Don't give up on me. A tear falls from Dan's eye. He carefully places the paper into his jacket pocket and forced himself to his feet. I can't give up. Not now. Not yet. He was able to reach the road, and he receives his phone from inside his pocket jacket. All or nothing, he says to himself. With all of his courage, he calls her. Hello, says a female voice. Hey, it's me. I need help, says Dan. Dan, what's wrong? Where are you? She replies. I'm here in Florida, and I was just mugged. Florida? What? We're in Florida, and again, what? I'm in a park. It has a lot of space and blue picnic benches, and it's a long story. All I know is that I don't have my wallet. I think I know where you are. Don't move. I'll be right there, says the girl. After a short wait, a car comes speeding down the road. With a sudden stop, screet, it comes to a sudden stop. At that moment, a small female exits the vehicle. Dan, shouts the female woman, what happened? I'm sorry, Dan says. The figure finally comes into view, and it was his very good friend Annie, the girl he came to visit. What happened to you, Dan? Says Annie. Like I said, it's a long story, but I'm fine now. I'm glad you're here. Annie proceeds to help Dan into the car. They slowly start traveling down the single road. After a short drive, they reach Annie's home. Finally, says Dan. What? Annie replies shockingly. They pulled into the driveway. Before Annie could undo her seatbelt, Dan says in a sharp and painful groan, "Wait!" "What?" she says, quickly turning towards Dan. "There's something I need to tell you," Dan uttered. Before Annie could gather the thoughts to respond, Dan leaned towards her. With what felt like a strong push, Dan was knocked back by a mere shove of the arm. "Do that again and you will sleep in the grass," Annie yelled. "Okay, sorry, I was kidding is all. Trying to lighten up the mood a little." Annie tells Dan that she has to check if her parents are in the living room behind the oak and frosted glass door. Dan began to look around at the house he had thought about so much. "It's more spacious than I had imagined it would have been," Dan soliloquized to himself. Annie removed the seatbelt and exits the car and looks over the hedge in front of the window next to the door. "Looks clear. We should get you upstairs before anyone sees you," Annie says. She quickly helps Dan to his feet and moves him up the stairs. "Hold on," says Annie. "What?" "Shh," she replies. What Dan hadn't realized is that Annie's father was slowly walking by. "When is Annie getting back?" "Don't worry about it, Jake. Come back to bed," says Annie's mother. Annie's father proceeds to his room and closes the door. "Okay, we can move now," says Annie. Both quickly make their way up the rest of the stairs and into Annie's room. She quickly shuts the door but pauses for an instant. "I want the whole story," she says. "What? Now?" Dan replies. "Yes, now." Dan sits down at the edge of Annie's bed and starts to tell the entire story. By the time Dan finishes, he realizes the expression on Annie's face. He sits there and analyzes her closely. "Annie," says Dan, you came all the way down here for me? Just you and your car?" Annie replies. "Well, yeah, I wanted it to be a surprise." With those words, it felt like a large weight of sadness and despair had been lifted off his shoulders. "Dan," Annie says softly. Dan looked towards her. "Yes, Anne." In an instant, Annie pulls Dan close and kisses him. Dan slowly wraps his arm around Annie. She slowly looked up to Dan with a soft voice says, "I love you." It finally happened. After so much pain and hardship, Dan had fulfilled his long-awaited dream to come true. On that night in that room, the sparks of love finally lights up. The end. By Big Bob.